Untold Black Stories. The badge on his chest was supposed to symbolize justice. But soon, Leon Washington would learn that sometimes the line between law and lawlessness wasn't drawn on the other side of the police tape, but right through the heart of the precinct where he had so dreamed of serving. And this path to enlightenment, strangely enough, began with an ordinary first day of internship. The freshly pressed, night sky blue uniform felt a bit unfamiliar on Leon, like someone else's skin he still had to get used to. 22 years old, with eyes burning with a mixture of youthful zeal and serious determination, he stood before the massive building of the 17th Police Precinct. His heart pounded in his chest, not from fear, but from anticipation. This was his first day, the first step on a path he sincerely believed could make a difference for the better. He had seen enough injustice on the streets of his neighborhood to understand, real change starts from within. And he wanted to be a part of that change, not just a bystander. Inside, the precinct buzzed like a disturbed beehive. Ringing phones, clattering keyboards, hushed conversations, the sharp smell of coffee and disinfectants, it all created an atmosphere of constant tension and activity. Leon breathed in this air, trying to absorb every detail. He was directed to the captain's office, where, after a brief, formal chat, he was introduced to his supervising officer, Officer Dave Reynolds. Reynolds was a man in his 50s, with tired but perceptive eyes, graying temples, and a sturdy build that spoke of years of service. His handshake was firm, and his gaze direct, one that seemed to see right through Leon. "Washington, huh?" Reynolds rasped, nodding towards a vacant chair beside his paper-strewn desk. "Heard you're one of those idealists who want to change the world. Well, here you'll see the world as it is, not as they paint it in books." Leon just gave a reserved nod. He was prepared for cynicism, for skepticism. The main thing was to gain experience. The first few hours flew by unnoticed, familiarization with procedures, filling out some forms, a quick tour of the precinct. Reynolds seemed strict but fair. He didn't coddle, spoke directly, sometimes sharply, but his words carried the weight of experience. Leon listened attentively, trying to memorize every little thing. Closer to lunchtime, a call came in, a robbery at a small convenience store on the outskirts of their district. According to preliminary information, the perpetrator was a lone black male, dressed in dark clothing. Reynolds grabbed his jacket. "Let's go, kid. You'll see how real cops work, not the ones in TV shows." A patrol car was already at the crime scene. The terrified store owner, an elderly woman, described the attacker in a trembling voice. The description was quite vague: young, tall, black, took all the cash, threatened me with something like a knife. Reynolds professionally surveyed the premises, asking short, precise questions. Leon stayed close, trying not to get in the way, but also not to miss anything important. He noticed broken glass on the counter and a few scattered items, signs of a struggle, or just haste. When they returned to the precinct, Reynolds began to review reports of similar incidents and the database of known offenders. After a while, he stopped at one photograph. "This one looks like a match," he said, jabbing a finger at a picture of a young black man with a sullen look. Jamal Green. Petty thief, already had priors. Lives not far from that store. Leon peered over his supervisor's shoulder. The guy in the photo did resemble the description, but there were hundreds of guys like him in their neighborhood. "Are you sure, officer?" Leon asked cautiously. Reynolds snorted. "The court will be sure, Washington. Our job is to find the most likely one. And this Green, believe me, is always lurking around when there's easy money to be made. It's his MO." Something in Reynolds' tone made Leon tense up, slightly. There was no concrete evidence pointing specifically to this Jamal Green, other than a general resemblance and previous trouble with the law. The words, his MO, sounded overly confident, as if a verdict had already been passed before any real investigation had begun. Leon quickly dismissed the thought. He was a rookie. Reynolds was an experienced officer. He probably saw things Leon didn't yet understand. Probably. For the next few days, Leon immersed himself in Jamal Green's case. Together with Reynolds, they interviewed potential witnesses, reviewed surveillance footage from cameras near the robbed store, and gathered any information that could shed light on the incident. Reynolds seemed unshakably convinced of Green's guilt, and he interpreted every new detail as further proof of his own correctness. However, Leon couldn't shake his doubts. He carefully studied the case files, and the more he learned, the more discrepancies appeared. For instance, one camera had captured a figure in dark clothing running down the street around the time of the robbery, but the recording quality was so poor that identifying the person was impossible. Reynolds immediately declared that it was undoubtedly Green. "See how he's running?" Typical for him, he tossed at Leon, as if expecting him to agree without question. During one of their patrols in the neighborhood where Green lived, Reynolds, accidentally, found a dark sweatshirt in a trash can near Green's building, similar to the one described by the store owner. There were no obvious marks, tags, or anything that could definitively link it to Green or the crime, but Reynolds immediately added it to the case as physical evidence. "That's it, Washington," he said with a satisfied smile. "We've got him. A few more finds like this, and this scumbag will be put away for a long time." Leon tried to ask cautious questions. "Officer, but this sweatshirt could belong to anyone. We can't be sure it's the one the victim saw, or that Green wore it." Reynolds just waved him off. "You're still Green, kid. You don't understand how this works. Our job is to gather enough for the prosecutor to press charges. And this guy is definitely guilty, we're just helping him get what he deserves. He's a cancer in our neighborhood, and the sooner we isolate him, the better it'll be for everyone." Those words cut Leon to the quick. Helping him get what he deserves. Wasn't it the court's job to determine guilt and punishment? The internal conflict in Leon's soul grew with each passing hour. He had joined the police force to serve the law, not to tailor facts to a predetermined narrative. He remembered conversations with his father, an old activist who always said, "Son, the system can be cruel, especially to those who have no voice. Your job is to be the voice of justice, even if it's hard." One evening, staying late at the precinct, Leon accidentally overheard a snippet of Reynolds' conversation with another detective, older and just as cynical-looking. They were standing by the coffee machine, and Reynolds, lowering his voice, said, "Yeah, Green is almost a done deal. Just need to tweak one witness's testimony a bit to make the picture perfect. A couple of weeks, and he'll be gone for a long time." The detective chuckled. "You're a master of such tweaks, Dave. Just make sure your intern doesn't suspect anything." Reynolds laughed. "That idealist? He still believes in the tooth fairy. For now, he swallows everything I tell him." His supervisor's words hit Leon like a blow to the head. He felt his blood run cold. These were no longer just doubts or inexplicable actions. This was direct confirmation of his worst fears. Reynolds wasn't just biased, he was deliberately fabricating evidence. And the suspect, Jamal Green, could become a victim of this fabrication simply because he was a convenient target. Leon quietly retreated into the shadows of the hallway, his heart pounding wildly. He realized he was facing a choice that would define not only his future but also who he truly was. The conversation Leon had overheard between Reynolds and the other detective gave him no peace. The words about tweaking testimonies and his supervisor's laughter echoed in his head, drowning out all other thoughts. He could no longer attribute everything to his inexperience or the cynicism of the old guard. This was something far worse, a deliberate criminal act, cloaked by a police badge. The next day, Leon arrived at work with a heavy heart. He tried to act normally, listened attentively to Reynolds, nodded in response to his instructions, but inside, everything was churning. Every glance from his supervisor, every remark, was now perceived through the prism of what he had heard. He no longer saw an experienced mentor, but a man ready to ruin someone else's life for the sake of statistics or his own prejudices. Deciding he needed irrefutable proof, Leon began to act more cautiously. He knew Reynolds kept all the materials on Green's case in his desk, in a specific folder. He needed a moment when his supervisor was away. Such an opportunity arose during the lunch break. Reynolds, as usual, went to the canteen with several other officers, leaving his office empty. Leon's heart pounded as he, looking around, quickly entered the office. His fingers trembled as he opened the desk drawer. There it was, the folder labeled Green, J. He quickly flipped through the pages, reports, photographs, interrogation protocols. And then, his gaze fell upon a sheet with the testimony of the only witness who had allegedly seen Green near the crime scene. The testimony was typed, but at the bottom, in small handwriting, were pencil corrections. Some words were crossed out, others added, changing the essence of what was said. And the handwriting. Leon recognized it. It was Reynolds' handwriting. He remembered Reynolds complaining a few days ago that the witness was a bit confused in his testimony, and that he needed help refreshing his memory. Now it was clear what that help meant. It was direct falsification. Just then, he heard footsteps outside the door. Barely managing to put the folder back and close the drawer, he slipped out of the office a moment before Reynolds entered. His supervisor looked suspiciously at Leon, who was trying to appear as casual as possible, as if he were just passing by. "What are you doing here, Washington?" Reynolds asked, narrowing his eyes. "Just looking for you, officer." Wanted to clarify something about the report, Leon lied, trying to keep his voice from trembling. Reynolds stared at him intently for a few more seconds, then shrugged and walked to his desk. Leon walked away, feeling cold sweat trickling down his back. That was too close. But now he had proof, albeit indirect, but substantial enough to understand what was happening. He tried to cautiously talk to Maria Sanchez, a young officer who had joined the precinct only a year before him and seemed more open and less cynical than the others. He told her about his doubts, without going into detail about the discovered corrections, just hinting at Reynolds' strange methods. Maria listened to him, her face growing serious. "Leon," she said quietly, looking around, "I understand what you mean. But be careful. Very careful. Reynolds has been here a long time, he has a lot of connections. Don't stick your nose where it's not wanted if you don't want trouble. Sometimes it's better to just do your job and turn a blind eye to some things." Her words, though spoken with obvious concern, only intensified Leon's sense of isolation. He realized that counting on help from within was futile. The wall of silence was too strong. The shock of realizing what was happening mixed with despair. His ideals were shattering against the harsh reality of a corrupt system. But along with despair, a cold determination was also dawning. He couldn't just turn a blind eye. He couldn't let an innocent person be convicted due to falsifications. If Jamal Green was truly guilty, it had to be proven by an honest investigation, not by tampered evidence. That evening, back home, Leon sat in the dark for a long time. He weighed all the pros and cons. Exposing Reynolds meant putting an end to his career, becoming an outcast, possibly even putting himself in danger. But to remain silent meant betraying himself, his principles, everything he had joined the police force for. And he made a decision. With trembling hands, he took out his old laptop. He would start gathering evidence. Every detail, every inconsistency, every suspicious word or action by Reynolds. He didn't know what he would do with this information next, but he knew one thing: he would not remain silent any longer. The decision was made, and Leon saw no way back for himself. For the next few weeks, he followed Reynolds like a shadow, documenting every little detail. He secretly made copies of documents where he noticed inconsistencies, recorded snippets of conversations on a voice recorder that seemed suspicious to him, and meticulously noted dates, times, and circumstances of any manipulations by his supervisor. It was risky. Every day he lived on the edge of being discovered, but the thought of Jamal Green, who could become a victim of the system, gave him strength. He compiled a small but, in his opinion, convincing dossier. It contained copies of pages from Green's case file with obvious alterations by Reynolds, an audio recording where his supervisor boasted about helping a witness remember the necessary details, and his own observations, documented with pedantic accuracy. Now came the hardest part: what to do with it. Going to the precinct captain seemed futile. Reynolds was his longtime subordinate, and the captain would most likely cover for his officer. Contacting the media or lawyers would be too radical a step for an intern, which could instantly ruin his own reputation before the truth even came out. Only one path remained: internal affairs, IA. This was the structure created specifically for such cases, although it was shrouded in an aura of distrust among rank-and-file officers. One morning, summoning all his courage, Leon anonymously sent the collected materials to IA, detailing his suspicions about Officer Reynolds and his methods of handling Jamal Green's case. He understood that anonymity wouldn't last long if the investigation began in earnest. And it did begin. A few days later, IA investigators appeared at the precinct. Initially, everything happened quietly. Individual officers were called in for questioning, and documentation was reviewed. But soon, rumors began to spread, and Reynolds' name featured in them more and more frequently. And then, Leon was called in too. The interrogation was long and grueling. The investigators asked countless questions, trying to catch him in contradictions, verifying his every word. Leon stood firm, telling only what he had seen and heard, providing the facts he had gathered. He didn't accuse, but merely presented his observations and evidence. The reaction in the precinct was swift. When it became known that it was the intern's testimony that had triggered the investigation, the atmosphere around Leon turned icy. Colleagues who had greeted him friendly just yesterday now demonstratively turned away or cast contemptuous glances at him. The word snitch wasn't spoken aloud, but it hung in the air. Reynolds, who was temporarily suspended from Green's case during the investigation, furiously denied all accusations, trying to discredit Leon. He claimed the intern was incompetent, got something mixed up due to inexperience, or even hinted at personal motives, as if Leon held some grudge against him. Leon felt completely isolated. Even Maria Sanchez, though not showing open hostility, now kept her distance, her gaze filled with a mixture of sympathy and fear. The pressure was colossal. Sometimes, he felt he had made a terrible mistake, that the system would simply crush him. There were also veiled threats, anonymous notes in his locker, slashed tires on his old car. He understood he had crossed many influential people who were used to living by their own rules, not by the written law. But every time doubts began to take over, he remembered Jamal Green's face in the photograph, a young man who could end up behind bars because of a fabricated case. And that gave him the strength to hold on. He had done what he had to do. He had chosen the side of truth, no matter the cost. The IA investigation continued. Each day brought new tension. Leon didn't know how it would all end for Reynolds, for Green, and most importantly, for himself. But he felt he had crossed the Rubicon. His naive idealism was shattered, but something else was emerging from its ruins, a hardened determination to fight for justice, even if he was one against all. The weeks dragged on, filled with tense anticipation. The internal affairs investigation finally concluded, and its results, though not a loud sensation, had their consequences. The evidence collected by Leon, along with additional findings by the investigators, proved substantial enough for the case against Jamal Green to fall apart. It turned out that some of the evidence found by Reynolds had been planted, and the testimony of the key witness had been grossly falsified. Jamal Green was released due to a lack of credible evidence, albeit without an official apology from the system. For Leon, it was a small, bitter victory. He had helped prevent an injustice, but the price was high. As for Officer Reynolds, he wasn't fired immediately. The system, as always, tried to protect its own and minimize reputational damage. He was transferred to desk duty, away from operational activities, with the official wording, pending completion of an internal review. Rumor had it in the corridors that he would be allowed to quietly serve until retirement if he didn't make a fuss. For Leon, this was further proof of how deeply rotten the system was. The culprit wasn't duly punished, merely temporarily removed from sight. But the main blow awaited Leon himself. One day, the precinct captain summoned him to his office. The conversation was short and cold. "Washington," the captain began, not looking him in the eye, "your internship is coming to an end. And, I must say, you've proven yourself," ambiguously. He paused, choosing his words. "You understand that after everything that has happened, your continued work in this precinct is impossible. You've created a certain atmosphere of discomfort for many officers." Leon remained silent, though inside he was seething with indignation. Discomfort? He had exposed a criminal in uniform, and that was called discomfort. "We appreciate your vigilance," the captain continued, avoiding the word honesty. "But sometimes, excessive vigilance can harm team spirit. Therefore, for your own good, and for the good of the precinct, we believe it's better for you to look for opportunities elsewhere. Perhaps police work is just not for you." Then came the phrase he had expected, but which still hit hard: "We suggest you write a letter of resignation, effective, at your own request. This will allow you to avoid a negative entry in your personnel file and, perhaps, try to find work in another department, if you still wish to do so. Otherwise, well, you understand. We can find formal reasons for your non-certification." It was an ultimatum, disguised as friendly advice. Leon understood he had no choice. To fight further would mean spending years in litigation with no guarantee of success, becoming a true pariah in police circles across the country in the process. With a heavy heart, he wrote the resignation letter. When he left the precinct for the last time, none of his former colleagues even glanced his way. He was an outcast, a man who had violated the unwritten code of silence. His dreams of serving in the police, of changing the system from within, were shattered. All that remained was bitterness, disappointment, and a sharp sense of injustice. He had done the right thing, but the system had punished him for it. The next few months were difficult. He tried to find work, but rumors of his incident at the 17th precinct seemed to precede him. The doors of other police departments were closed to him. He felt crushed and devastated. Sometimes he asked himself if it had been worth it. Wouldn't it have been better to keep silent, as Maria had advised? But then he remembered Jamal Green's face, who could have been unlawfully convicted. And though it was small comfort, somewhere deep down, he knew he couldn't have acted otherwise. He had lost his career, but he had kept his conscience. And that, perhaps, was the most important thing. He stood at a crossroads, not knowing where to go next, but with a firm conviction that his fight for justice was not yet over. It would simply take other forms. A year passed. A year that changed Leon. The bitterness of his dismissal and shattered dreams gradually subsided, giving way to a hardened resolve. He hadn't been idle. Unable to find his place in the police force, he decided to fight for justice through other means. Leon enrolled in the law faculty of the local university, planning to become a lawyer, a defender for those who, like Jamal Green once, could fall victim to the system. Alongside his studies, he began volunteering at a small non-profit organization that monitored police actions and protected citizens' rights. He studied laws, analyzed cases of police misconduct, and advised people who had faced injustice. This experience gave him a new perspective on the problem. He saw it not only from the inside but also from the outside. The story with Officer Reynolds and his exposure, though it didn't have immediate drastic consequences, did not pass without a trace. After Jamal Green's case fell apart, and information about Reynolds' methods, albeit muted, leaked to the local media thanks to the efforts of community activists, among whom Leon now was, though not publicizing his role in the initial exposure, talk of the need for reform in the police department began in the city. Several similar scandals that surfaced in other precincts only intensified public pressure. Eventually, the old police chief resigned, and a new person took his place, Amelia Hargrove, a woman with a reputation as a reformer, known for her tough stance on corruption and abuse within law enforcement. One of her first steps was to announce the creation of a new department, the Office of Professional Responsibility and Ethics, which would have significantly broader powers than the old internal affairs and would be directly accountable to the police chief. One day, as Leon was preparing for his exams, he received a call from an unknown number. "Mr. Washington," a confident female voice said on the line. "My name is Amelia Hargrove, I am the new police chief of our city. I have a proposal for you that I hope you will consider." Leon was stunned. The police chief calling him? He couldn't imagine what she could want from him. They met the next day in her office. Amelia Hargrove turned out to be an energetic middle-aged woman with a perceptive gaze. She didn't beat around the bush. "Mr. Washington, I've reviewed your case. And what happened at the 17th precinct a year ago," she said directly. "What you did required considerable courage. You did the right thing, even when the system tried to break you. And those are exactly the kind of people I need." She told him about the creation of the new Office of Professional Responsibility and Ethics. "I want this office to be a real tool for cleaning up the system, not just a smokescreen," Hargrove explained. "And I want to offer you a position as an inspector in this office. Your experience, your integrity, and your knowledge of the system from the inside, both its bright and dark sides, will be invaluable." Leon listened, unable to believe his ears. To return? After everything that had happened? At first, he felt doubt. Wasn't this another trap? Could he change anything, or would he again crash against the wall of cronyism? But looking into Amelia Hargrove's eyes, he saw a sincere desire for change. And he understood that this was a unique chance. A chance not just to fight the system from the outside, but to try to change it from within, but this time from a different, more influential position. "I understand your doubts," Hargrove said, as if reading his mind. "It won't be easy. But I promise you my full support. We need people who are not afraid to speak the truth." After a long pause, Leon nodded. "I accept, Chief Hargrove." A week later, Leon Washington put on a uniform again. But this time, it wasn't the uniform of a patrol intern. It was the uniform of an inspector for the Office of Professional Responsibility and Ethics. He was back. Not as the naive idealist he had been a year ago, but as a man who had gone through bitter disappointments but had not lost faith in justice. He knew the price of truth, knew how strong the system could be, but now he had new weapons, knowledge, experience, and, most importantly, authority. His fight continued, and there were many challenges ahead, but this time he was more prepared for them than ever. His gaze was firm and resolute. The path to change would be long, but the first step on that path had already been taken. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, drop a comment and hit that subscribe button. We're building something real, and we can't do it without your help. More untold stories are coming.